ever hit a bigger home run in your life?
Canada is the second largest landmass, the first nation of hockey, and the best part of North America. My name is Joe, and I am Canadian.
Welcome, everybody, to the Great Canadian Violent Community Summit, is what we're calling it today. I am joined by three fellow countrymen. Brian from Embryonic Robot from the great city of Toronto. Jason Arsenault from a place so remote that Sasquatch doesn't even live there in northern British Columbia. Hello, Jason.
Hey.
And from the prairies where it's so flat you can watch your dog run away for a week, Racer Joe. How you doing, sir?
I'm well. Take off, you hosers.
There you go. We had a kind of an idea, me and a few others, about sitting down to chat about Canadian music. And I'm sure that this video will be enjoyed by 17 people on YouTube once it goes live. But I thought it'd be fun kind of conversation for us to sort of talk about, you know, what does Canadian music mean to Canadians, and what is some of the stuff you listen to, and what is some of the stuff that we might want to recommend that other folks get into. So, I mean, I guess the kind of the place to start, I guess, for those that are you know, maybe trying to decide, do I want to sit and watch the rest of this video, kind of go around the horn. But, you know, what does Canadian music mean to you guys, and who are sort of who's kind of your Mount Rushmore of Canadian music? Who are the people that kind of shape this pretty vibrant musical landscape we have? Let's go first, Brian.
Sure. So it's a deceptively simple question, but you know, I guess if I think of the Mount Rushmore, we start with that concept. Sure. For me, I mean, this is all very personal, of course, but you know, I kind of separated out between when I was a younger person and when I was an older person. So, you know, like, let me give you an example of Rush, a band that everybody knows. I didn't really care for when I was younger, but I've grown to appreciate now. For me, though, I think the premier Canadian artist, in my opinion, is Leonard Cohen. Always has been. Probably always will be.
No surprise.
But you know, I always think of the heavy hitters, the people like Neil Young, the band, Leonard Cohen, even Joni Mitchell, Rush, people I've mentioned. And then I guess it's one of those things where there's a lot of artists who are less well known, who deserve some attention, that somehow get overlooked. How long do we have for each of these sections, by the way?
Whatever it takes.
You know, yeah, I mean, this is a really hard question because there are so many people, like, just again, thinking like people like the Tragically Hip, and Sloan is somebody that I'm sure we'll mention too. So I guess those are the big acts, the ones I would say are, you know, the Mount Rushmore acts. But there's so many other relatively unknown acts in Canada. And as a Canadian, one thing I always am amazed at or surprised at is when I find that someone who doesn't live in Canada actually knows a band or an artist that you didn't expect them to. And that's sort of been something I've been more aware of since being in the VC. So someone will mention April Wine, and I'm thinking, what? You know who April Wine is, and you live in Chicago? It doesn't really compute with me. Or when someone knows, even a band that's a little more obscure than it, like perhaps Skinny Puppy, you hear someone knows who they are. And it really surprises me. And it's one of those things where it's really hard to gauge, you know, how influential Canadian artists are outside Canada, because you really don't know what sort of exposure they're getting unless you've traveled somewhere and sort of got a sense of it.
Well, you make a good point there, right? Because there's bands that we think are something, and you talk to often our American friends that go, never heard of them.
Yeah.
Our perspective is highly skewed, of course.
Right.
Yeah, there's internationally known, right? And that's the Shanias and the Bryan Adams and, you know, Neil Young. There's a lot of that. But to Brian's point, there's the Tragically Hip, there's Sloan, there's Red Rider. There's a lot of bands that are equally as good. And if they were American, more would know about them, I think, possibly. And Australia, I think, suffers from that a little bit too. Not to side shoot to Australia, but I think we all know In Excess, we all know, you know, Midnight Oil, we know those, but they've got a whole
and the Wiggles,
really good, and what?
And the Wiggles,
and the Wiggles. Well, yeah, exactly. So
the biggest touring band in Australia.
They are. That's right. So there's there's big, well-known Canadian acts internationally, and there's big, well-known Canadian acts locally, if we want to call ourselves local.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting when Rob, you had this idea. I was actually a little hesitant to come on because my first reaction, and I'm kind of jumping off a point that Brian briefly made there when he talked about Rush and not, initially liking them. When I was younger, not that I'm like too old now, but relatively recently, I only started to appreciate a band like Rush and other Canadian bands. But when I was growing up, radio stations played, in my view, growing up, way too much Canadian music. Like whatever that sound is, that's kind of hard to define of Canadian music. It was out there and it was just omnipresent. It was just too much. And it was like, how come you're not playing the Zeppelin? How come you're not playing, these other international stars? And so I come at this from a very, humble perspective of only relatively recently really appreciating Canadian artists. Now, I've always had pride in any Canadian that made it big, like your Jonies and your Neils. And Neil's like one of my top 5 favorite artists ever. But it's the other bands that, I was just sick of hearing on the radio. Like for the longest time, and Rush is the prime example of this, I couldn't stand them. But I was completely ignorant. And it wasn't until I watched a documentary about 10, 15 years ago, I can't remember the name of it, but it was showed these humble, down-home Canadian guys just traveling their hometown. Oh, this is where we used to play here and that. And you got to know them. And then it's and in that case, you got to know how great of musicians they were. But I guess all that to be said, I didn't really get into Canadian music until relatively recently. And actually, when I started watching a lot of YouTube stuff and glommed on to Rob here and, really understanding that there is a lot of room to have a lot of passion about the artists from our country. But yeah, like Brian said, Rush, April Wine, Tom Cochrane, the major Canadian artists that just clogged, in my opinion, the airways growing up. And I think I understand that in radio, and I guess you guys would know better than me, but I think a radio station in Canada, for example, would have to play a certain percentage of Canadian content, right?
Right.
So you'd always get the same kind of music all the time because there's only so many of them.
Well, and you bring that up, and I'm glad you did. There's, for those not in Canada, there is a governing body called the Canadian Radio and Television Commission, the CRTC, which governs radio, governs television, telecommunications. And there was in the mainly 80s into the 90s, there was a big CanCon requirement where stations had to play X amount of Canadian content. Like it was mandatory. And while that may seem, authoritarian or whatever, I think, and I could be wrong, but I think what that did is that really sort of enabled the fledgling Canadian music industry to grow, and it has blossomed into something that is nowadays pretty damn spectacular. I don't know that it would have had it not been given the air to breathe because of the CanCon requirements. I could be wrong. I mean,
no, that well said for sure.
Because there's the Canadian music that everyone identifies. The early pioneers. In my Mount Rushmore, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Gordon Lightfoot. Right, those are kind of the three that blaze the trail, and Rush is right there too. And I mean, pretty much every American would be familiar with those. But then there was kind of a newer wave of Canadian music that really flourished in the late 80s, early 90s. Your Tragically Hips, your Blue Rodeos, your Tom Cochrane, that kind of stuff. I mean, I think that was able to happen because of those. I don't believe those radio regulations are in effect anymore. I don't think. Right?
I think they still exist.
Do they?
And I agree. I think we would have been swallowed up or overshadowed by American content, American media, American culture. But I think they still exist because there isn't there something now that says that your YouTube feed will have to represent a certain percentage of Canadian content,
something like that.
So I think it still exists.
Yeah.
But there are problems with it. I mean, wasn't a few years ago a Bryan Adams song wasn't considered for the Juno Awards because it wasn't considered Canadian.
Yeah,
I can't remember the reason for it, but
I can tell you the reason. So, and I'll throw this up in post production. For many, many years, and still some artists still do it, on the back of a CD or a vinyl, there is a circle that has 4 letters in it, and I can't remember what they are. CRL.
MAPL, right?
Or MAPL, thank you.
Yeah.
And those signify the 4 components of the recording. The performer, the writer, where it was recorded, whatever. I forget what those 4 components are. And in order to be considered Canadian, I think you had to have 3 of those 4 components. And Bryan Adams was disqualified for like album of the year at the Junos, which is like our Grammys, because he only had 2 of the 4, which is absolutely stupid. But that was a big controversy.
And to your point, Jason, about being sick of, say, the Rush and the Guess Who, even worse, if you want to call it worse, I'm not sure that's the right way to put it, but when I was a DJ, it was a country station, part of it in the 80s. So there was even less country artists. So it was like Anne Murray every hour, and it was Murray McLaughlin every hour, because there was just only so many of them. George Canyon, like there's a lot more now, but there was only about 5 or 6, and we still had the same regulations. So we didn't have as much of a field to draw from. So I'm serious. It was like you had on the little wheel that the program director made up there. It just had Anne Murray as a slot. You just played something by Anne Murray every hour. But
that's great, because it does remind me that there was an exception to the Con-Can rules years ago, and that was for classical radio, because there wasn't anything that they could play.
There wasn't anybody. Yeah,
that's
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Getting back to a point I think Jason made when he mentioned the Canadian sound. That's a very hard thing to define, but would you guys agree that there is such a thing? I've tried to make the point in a couple of videos that in fact there is. But what does that mean to you guys, or do you think that's just purely marketing hype?
I can't help but believe it's true, but you could totally call me out for not really being able to give you a solid answer on what that is. I have no idea.
It's not a matter of calling you out. And I've tried to do it before because I've done a couple Canadian-centric videos. I don't know what it is. Like, what is Prism and Trooper and Streetheart and Triumph besides rock and roll? So there's a little bit of a Canadian sound, but is it a Canadian sound in my mind because I know they're all Canadian? Is it Tragically Hip? Is it Gordon Lightfoot and Leonard Cohen, like songwriting, and Neil Young songwriting? Is it based in the songwriting? Joni Mitchell. I don't know that there is a way to nail down what is the Canadian sound.
I think there is in certain cases, like the Acadian sound, maybe the East Coast sound. But I think you're right. In some respects, it sounds like rock and roll. Like maybe Rush is a unique. I don't think there's anyone else quite like Rush, but that doesn't necessarily make them Canadian. It just makes them a little different, perhaps. But there's the lyrics, of course. Tragically Hip songs say a lot about Canada, so that's one thing you can't deny. But whether that's a Canadian sound, I'm not really sure. I don't think people can detect a Canadian accent even in singing, so I think it sounds like rock and roll and folk and country, whatever it is, with some exceptions maybe, and Indigenous music maybe would be another one.
Bob and Doug, they know Bob and Doug.
That's right.
and Getty on that song, right? So
I think Brian's probably right. It's often spoke of as the Canadian sound, but I don't know that it's a sound. But there certainly is bands that perform music that sort of tap into the Canadian cultural experience. The Hip is the first band that comes to mind. Gordon Lightfoot, Blue Rodeo, those bands, they have songs about being Canadian or about this country, and whether it's talking about the country or talking about the experience that we go through as citizens of this country. I think there's, and I would have to actually put a lot of thought into this and actually come up with some examples, which I'm not going to do today, but I think there are certain bands that kind of, as you tap the maple tree for some syrup, there is some singer-songwriters and bands out there that tap the cultural experience that writes songs that sort of resonate with us a little bit more because it relates to our cultural experience. Maybe I'm full of shit. I don't know.
No, I think you're. Sorry.
Go ahead, Brian. No.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's something that's definitely true, but I think it's also a bit risky. You know, if you're going to break into the United States market or even the UK market, you need to be not so niche, right? You don't want to sing about Kingston, Ontario, maybe it wouldn't resonate. So there might be that sort of component that bands don't want to sound too Canadian.
Yeah, I was just going to say something similar to that, Brian, and that because we're talking about music that strikes a chord with Canadians through its lyrics and things like that. And for me, that is the hip, right? Like that is the Tragically Hip, right? So this is their best, one of their best of albums they put out in 2005. It's got everything I want to hear on it. This is a band that was, you know, from the basically the mid 80s until, you know, Gord died, right? And that, you know, I don't know, man. Like when I watch the Ahead by a Century music video, because it was just all over Much Music forever, right? Like to me, that song and that music video and so many of their songs, I've never been more prideful as a Canadian with respect to music as when I'm listening to the Tragically Hip. And I guess I'm that right age bracket too, right? I was kind of like this is my high school music kind of thing, and I'm all in on that. And to me, this is the band that makes me feel very Canadian. That being said, I don't feel like when I talk about what a Canadian sound is, I don't even put these guys in that bracket. But it's so strange because like I think their lyrics kind of do that, but the music doesn't. But this is the perfect example of a Canadian band, a Canadian iconic band, one of our biggest, that just could not break it in the States. Yeah. I think they did an SNL slot, like, you know, and I think Dan Aykroyd was the one who introduced them, didn't he? Yeah. And in any event, they just couldn't make it work, and I have no idea why. I think these guys are great, or they just, like you said, like Brian, were they taking too much of a risk of just being too, Canadian centric? And then I don't know what it was, but that is my Canadian. You
make a really important point there, and I think part of the reason for those CanCon requirements is, you know, I think the goal of every band is to make it in the States, because the market in the States is 10 times larger than it is here, just by sheer virtue of population. But it's almost like this impenetrable wall, you know, that is very few bands or artists have been able to leap over. And I think a lot of them have tried and failed, but there's a lot of them that have also not resigned themselves, but a lot of them have went, you know what? We're okay. We can make out a damn good living here. The Hip are one of them. You know, they had, moderate success in the States, but I think by and large, not a lot of folks would know who they are. But they made a fantastic living, toured this country coast to coast countless times over the space of 35 years or whatever it was. Blue Road is another example. They said, you know what? We're good here. And, you know, what makes a Bryan Adams successful and a Tragically Hip not successful? I don't know.
Soundtracks. Maybe. Honestly, I think soundtracks a little bit, right? Like that one from Robin Hood. I mean,
please forgive me.
But I think that it elevated it. You know, we don't have that. I joked a little bit about Bob and Doug, but, you know, Men at Work talks about Australian. We don't necessarily have that anthem other than the Great White North, right? I mean, it is, and there's Takeoff in there, and it's definitely a parody somewhat. But really, is there another Canadian type of anthem that does say a lot of things about Canada? Come on, Joe, figure it out, man.
Well, there's the Stompin' Tom.
Stompin' Tom. Maybe. Oh, sure. Every song on every album. Yeah, for sure.
Stan Rogers, I'm not sure, but Stompin' Tom. But he wasn't really not well known in the States, though.
Yeah. Paul Brandt, again, you know, I mean, we talk about a lot of rock and roll on our channels, but Paul Brandt's an example of he writes a lot of traditional Canadian type songs, or at least he mentions them. He certainly brings up Alberta quite a bit. You know, the Guess Who got a few mentions every once in a while, running back to Saskatoon. There's always mentions. Even City and Colour talks about Saskatoon. So there's a bit, but I think it's odd, for me anyway. A lot of the big international acts are not a lot of my favorites. And I don't know if for some reason, I don't know why that is. Maybe because we get sick of them, because we do hear them that much more because they are. But I'm not a big Bryan Adams fan. I'm not a big Celine Dion fan. I appreciate their talent. I don't need cards and letters telling me I'm a dumbass. I appreciate their talent. Justin Bieber, again, I appreciate
you a letter.
talent, right? Sarah McLachlan, I'm good with both ways. That's fine. But it's a lot of the big names that a lot of people would recognize are the people that I don't like. And I don't know if that's just me. But we've got two of the biggest guys in hip hop or whatever. We've got The Weeknd. We've got Drake right now. Bieber's big when he wants to be. He's not as big currently, but he can be if he wants to be. So it's not that we haven't exported. I just don't know if the right people are the ones getting the attention, but that's me. That, again, my opinion. No cards and letters, my opinion. So
I'll assume that any of you three know more about this band than I do. I just know the hits. But let's talk about the Guess Who for a second. Did they what was their popularity in the States before and then after American Woman? Like, did that break them?
Yes.
In the States?
Yes.
Did they? So every Canadian artist just has to mention America in a song and have an eagle on the cover of the album, and then you're golden.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent anyway, but was it not? I mean, obviously, if you listen to it, it's almost like listening to Born in the USA and thinking that's an anthem for the United States. It's not. It's not. But American Woman, and if I remember the story correctly, this could all be bullshit, but Randy's guitar broke or something, right? Or Burton something, I can't remember. And they had just came back from the States and they were pissed off about America. So somewhere in the break of a concert, the impetus of American Woman came and then it grew from there. I think it's something like that.
Yeah. It was an impromptu thing on the stage is what my understanding was. Yeah.
Yep, and it's not a flattering song. It's not, just like you say, it's Born in the USA is not. Yeah, it's not a yay. But Guess Who are a good example. I mean, they're one of the few that had some cultural touchstones, but also I think was successful in the mainstream in the U.S. But I mean, they're one of the few now embroiled in legal drama, and I would argue rightfully so. But that's a topic for a whole other video. But
there's some younger bands that are still trying to. Glorious Sons, I know I mention them a lot, but they tour the States relentlessly. Whether they have any traction or not, I don't know for sure. If you were to be in somewhere in Texas and go, hey, have you heard the Glorious Sons? I don't know if that's the case, but I know they play it a lot because I follow them. And they, like I said, they play as many dates down there as they do up here. They definitely make sure they're Canadian and they get their Canadian dates in, but they do a lot down there. Again, whether they've gained any traction or not, I don't know. That's a different story, I guess, because I certainly don't hear them in the lexicon of the big names. Again, kind of like what I mentioned.
Well, speaking of Canadian bands, making it or whatever, or trying to, I just read on social media yesterday, there's a band I like out of Toronto. Brian's probably heard of them, The Beaches.
Yeah.
They're an all-female rock band from Toronto. They just won the Juno, I think, for Rock Band of the Year. And it was just announced that they're going to open for the Rolling Stones.
Whoa!
Oh, I didn't hear that.
On the last show of the tour too, down in San Diego or wherever it is, right?
Incredible! That's awesome.
I know.
Hats off.
And the Glorious Sons have opened up twice for the Stones before. They do a cover of "Gimme Shelter." They do a really good job, and whether that affected it or not, but the Stones are pretty good for that. But that's great for the Beaches, and they're pretty good. I saw them open for the Glorious Sons a while ago. I don't know if they get along that good anymore because there's that song "Blame Brett." I don't know if you guys are familiar with that by the Beaches, but that's the Brett. He's the one that pissed her off enough to write the song.
Okay, so, I wondered who the Brett was. Interesting.
That's the Brett. Yeah.
Okay. Very, very good. I'm still looking for that album. I haven't seen it. I could order it, but I'm trying to find it in a record store. So
that's a story, Rob, for your next video on the story behind the songs. There you go.
That may happen.
That was fantastic.
They're good though. They're talented. They're talented. Yeah. They're talented players. They put on a very good show. They'd been around for a little bit when I saw them, which was a couple of years ago. Good stage presence. Yeah. Just again, a good representative of Canada. that a few people know, but not a whole bunch yet.
Well, that's a good segue into something that I wanted to cover in the topic of our conversation is what's a Canadian band that you really like that doesn't get past the wall of the U.S. that maybe people want to hear. And before I answer that, look who we have joining us. There's Peter.
Well, there you go. Hi, guys. I think I got the time wrong.
That's okay.
I thought I was coming here to get ready early. Sorry about that.
We still have 35 minutes, so we're good.
Oh, lovely. Wow. Okay, so, please continue. Sorry.
Brian, Jason, and Joe. I don't know if you've met any of these guys or not, but...
Hi, Peter.
I think only... Oh, the name is very small on here. Is it Jay?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think
my
we
eyes
shared
are
a
still
screen
blurry
yet.
here too. Sorry. Okay. Hi, Jay. Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Jay is kind of... Peter's from Surrey, BC, correct?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Jay lives...
Yeah, I'm up north in Terrace,
BC.
On Terrace. Oh, okay. That's cool. Nice.
Yeah.
So...
Well, being Japan and BC, they might be the closest geographically than any of us, other than you two. You two are pretty close. You two Ontarians, right?
Yeah.
Very true.
Awesome.
So just before you jumped on, Peter, I was just posed a question to the group. You know, we were talking about how it's often very difficult for Canadian bands to sort of get past that impenetrable sort of wall of sound that is the U.S. So I asked everybody, what's a Canadian band that you're fond of that, you know, deserves some more recognition or that you want people to hear about? So.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So we'll go around the horn, right? Brian, you're sitting beside me. So what do you got?
I think this is another deceptively simple question. There's so many things, but I would say a band that is consistently great for the last 30 years and doesn't really get a lot of attention in the United States or perhaps in England as well is Sloan. I mentioned them earlier, but I think Sloan is the band because if you think of, I mean, we mentioned the Tragically Hip already, and they do have pockets of support in the States. I know that for sure, but I think Sloan maybe even less so. And for me, I find them a fascinating band because every member sings, every member writes, they produce albums that are of equal quality. I mean, they're all great. They all get reviewed well. They have this kind of power pop, Beatlesque kind of sound to them. So yeah, that's it. And I just think it's amazing. Unchanged lineup since the day they started. And I think I could go on and on, but I just think amazing band. It's surprising that they aren't as well. And again, I've never gone to the United States and tried to find out, you know, how well is Sloan known down here, but I get the sense that they aren't really well known outside of Canada. So that's the band I would argue that everyone needs to hear.
How do you describe them for folks that don't know them?
Well, I would say power pop, really interesting guitar music with excellent riffs, great melodies, very melodic, very catchy songs, Lennon and McCartney-esque kind of things. I'd agree. Say, but it's rock music though. It has guitar, it has drums. It's not it's straight ahead rock music and not in your face rock music. But I think just great hooks, power pop, really excellent.
I'd agree.
And that's my choice, I would say.
That's nice. Yeah, I think we had a live stream a couple weeks ago, Rob. Didn't I show a Sloan album or something?
You did.
Yeah, that's. I have a bunch of CDs upstairs. I don't even know how much of their stuff is on wax. Is there a fair bit? Is it all on wax yet? Or?
I think the majority of it. I think.
Yeah,
2/3 maybe.
Yeah. There was the high school I went to. I grew up in the Maritimes, like right in around Halifax. That's where Sloan is, right? And one of the members went to my high school. You know, you have the high school graduation class photos and everything. So obviously, his one little square photo had all kinds of like writing and stuff all over. It's pretty great. Little claim to fame. Yeah.
What's a band you like, Jay, that you think people should hear about?
Yeah, it was an easy choice for me. This artist is definitely not representative of a sound that is my usual wheelhouse by any stretch, but you know, typical Canadian, driving home from work one day, CBC radio, in between news stories, they play a song. I was like, what the hell is this? and it was all I could do and I didn't have like Shazam or anything on my phone to figure it out. And I had to go on, and I actually emailed the radio show and I said, what was this song I heard? And they actually replied like within the same day. And they told me what it was. And that was a song, Sleeping on the Blacktop by Coulter Wall. So I know Joe is familiar with this guy, and he's right in his neck of the woods here. So I would call this like outlaw country, bit of folk, bit of blues. This is his debut EP album. Sleeping on the Blacktop is probably his most famous hit. It's been featured on a bunch of different, TV and movie stuff, most notably, I think Hell or High Water. It was played on that. But Coulter Wall, I follow him on social media there on Instagram, and it's funny because right now it's in the prairies. There, he's like an authentic cowboy. Like he is actually there's his reels are like him literally yesterday branding cattle and letting them out in the field for the spring, and like the man is a legit cowboy dude, and he does a lot. Speaking about breaking through to the States, for the most part the tours that he's had are a lot of American performances. There's I think he does a bit of festival work, but a lot of stuff in typical kind of country strong sort of areas like Texas and whatever else, and so he's really flying the cowboy flag. But I think it comes naturally to him. I think it's you could be cynical about all these artists and say it's just a marketing thing, this and that, but I kind of actually do believe this guy is the real deal. And he grew up when he played guitar, he was playing the classic rock type of stuff. He was playing the Bob Dylan that made him want to become a singer-songwriter. His lyrics are fantastic. I think I mentioned him before on a stream, if not in a video, and there was some kind, I think when he first broke out, there was this series, I think it's a beer, Original 16 or whatever, right, in Canada, and they had this like series of shows, and there's a bunch of YouTube videos of Coulter playing and singing. This is like 5-10 years ago, and you see this guy's face, and he's still young now. He's got this baby face to him, and then when he opens his mouth, it's this deep, dark baritone voice, almost Johnny Cash like, and it really throws you for a loop. And the first time you watch him and you hear him, I'm like, what is this guy trying to prove? But then you hear him talking, and it's like, no, this is legit who this dude is. Anyway, I can't say enough about this guy. Anyone I talk to, I try to put them in this direction. I wish nothing but the best for him crossing over to the States and making a name for himself. I think his songwriting is absolutely superb. He's got that other element of cowboyism where he's got that cowboy poet element to him, right? So does some albums with like spoken word stuff. He does old school, really old kind of cowboy songs, and brings them to the forefront. Another guy who's an archaeologist of music, where he's bringing the old stuff. I think he covered a Marty Robbins song, Big Iron, on one of his albums. So anyway, Coulter Wall, that's a guy that I want every Canadian to know, and I want people in the States especially to kind of grab onto him.
He sounds like Johnny Cash if Johnny Cash smoked 4 packs a day.
Yes.
Right?
Well said.
I don't know if that's true, but it's pretty close.
Oh my God, it's pretty close. Yeah.
I saw him and his dad about 8 years ago in a guitar shop. So I like to say that I saw him buying the guitar that plays on that album. I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway,
two more things. I think his dad was the premier.
Yeah, that's
right. Brad Wall. Yeah, but another thing about this particular EP, on one of the songs, he's got a backing band, and that backing band is another Canadian group that I don't own anything yet, but I've streamed a lot of their stuff, and that's the Dead South. And that's kind of like a country borderline bluegrass, sort of a bit of Mumford and Sons, but way more Canadian. And again, I follow them as well, and they do a lot of touring, and they're huge in Europe. So another Canadian act, the Dead South, that's definitely worth listening to.
Signed to my favorite label in Toronto, 6 Shooter Records.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, they're from Regina. My daughter has gone out a couple of times with the lead singer, actually. So and they're playing, but I've never seen them. They're coming though, and I'm going to go see them in the fall. So the only other thing I'll say about Coulter, besides you nailed it, he is outstanding. He's really good. I think he's kind of got the ear of the Steve Earles and the Chris Stapletons of the world. So yes. I think, not to go on their coattails, because that's not what he's doing, but I think the people that should know do know, but there should be more people that know, if that makes sense, I think.
It totally does. Well said.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with, just because they're on the top of my little stack here, I'm not sure. They are doing new music, though, and I talk about them quite a bit, is the Northern Pikes. And the big one that I brought out was Snow in June, because it's the hard one to find. And I sent Jay Semko a note the other day. I said, Jay, you got to re-release this, man. Everybody wants this damn album. On Discogs, people send me an email about 3 times a week. Hey, you want to sell Snow in June? And I don't. And it's not a very good copy. So I want a new copy myself. But they had maybe a modicum of success down in the States. I think not really. And you know what? For Eastern Canada, I think they had, again, a modicum of success down there, and you guys would be able to attest more. I mean, She Ain't Pretty got played everywhere, but the first couple albums are pretty strong. This is a very good album, but the first couple albums are pretty strong. Big Blue Sky and Secrets of the Alibi. Yeah. And I'm not sure how much play they got out of Saskatchewan or Western Canada, but just talented, good songwriting. Great musicians. They've got the gentleman from Grapes of Wrath, whose name escapes me, but the lead singer from Grapes of Wrath is now playing with them as well, because Merle's not with them anymore. Oh. So you get a little bit of Grapes of Wrath when you see them, and you get a lot of the Northern Pikes as well. And I think Jay's got a solo album coming out as well. So they're still making new music. And again, for me, it helps. I went to high school with them. Like there's a lot of ties that obviously make me like them as much as I do. But I think if I can set that to the side and honestly say, I think they're a very, very talented band. And there's a lot of, and my whole stack is out of Saskatchewan, but they were probably, I was going to say they were probably the biggest. I don't know if they were the biggest, and then they weren't the best, because there was a lot of really good talent here, but they're my favorite. I guess I'll go with that. Good. So that's who I'd like everybody to know. And again, the old stuff's great, and there is new stuff as well. So it's not like I'm telling you to go and find old albums. There is some new music from them as well. So
how long have they been around, Joe? Like, when did they start up?
I graduated high school in 83, and they were a bar high school playing band, 82, 83. I went to high school. Like I said, I went to high school with them. They were a couple grades ahead. I went more with their brother and their sister. And then I was buddies with one of their drummers. I think they had a couple before they settled on Niggs and kept him in the band. But 82. So a while ago now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really the core, Brian and Niggs and Jay have been together. Merle, I think, is kind of come and gone at times. But again, the gentleman whose name escapes me from Grapes of Wrath has been with them for a while now. I've seen them play with them like up to 5-6 years ago. So I think I don't know if he's officially a Northern Pike, but he might as well be at this point.
Is it Kevin Kane? Is that right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, that sounds exactly right. Yeah.
They were Northern Pikes were well known in Ontario when the first two records came out, and I got Forest of Love quite recently, the 2019 record. So yeah,
it's still good. I mean, again, they're writing good songs still. They're not getting a lot of airplay or anything.
Yeah,
but they're writing good material still.
Mm-hmm.
Peter,
yeah,
cool. What's a band you want to share with the world?
I'd love to be able to comment along the way here, because Sloan, as soon as you mentioned the question, that was my first choice. And anytime on Quora somebody says, what's a band you think needs more attention, I always answer Sloan. But and Northern Pikes, that Snow in June. I was thinking of what are some really awesome classic Canadian albums from late 80s, early 90s. And one of them was Snow in June, and the other one was Now and Again by Grapes of Wrath. So interesting that you mentioned both of them. Yeah, it's a tough one, because I'd love to say like the Tea Party, but with one member now living in Australia for the last 15 years or so, it's really hard for them to even come to Canada to do shows. I'd love to say Danko Jones, but I think he's maybe too much straightforward rock for America. America doesn't seem to be into rock as much these days. But thinking about a band, if I search on YouTube to see reactions to their videos or just any videos by the band, a band that is really hard to find much of is Blood Ceremony. And one of the things that I think is really cool about Blood Ceremony is, first of all, they've only 5 albums so far. They formed mid-2000s. They had a 7-year gap between the last 2 albums. They started out as a stoner doom type band. And the story is that the lead singer, Ali O'Brien, she played flute. And she introduced the guitarist, Sean Kennedy, to Jethro Tull. And then he said, hey, flute with heavy guitar sounds really cool. You play the flute. Why don't you come in and guest on one of our songs? And she also had a Farfisa organ, so she brought that in. And the sessions just went so well, he said, why don't you join the band? So she became lead vocalist, flautist, and keyboard player for the band. They went through some lineup changes with drummers and bass players, but by the 3rd album, they had their solid lineup. And each album, they evolved their sound a little bit. So they're moving away from this heavy doom style, and they're going more into this late 60s, early 70s, what they're calling witch rock, because most of their themes are based on old like Victorian age or early 1900s stories about young women who are a bit odd and go away and discover witchcraft. And
that sounds like all the girls I knew in high school.
Pardon me? Oh, I see.
I said that sounds like all the girls I knew in high school. Sorry.
That's right. No problem. I think I might have known one myself. But yeah, their most recent album finally came out last year, and they still have some of the heavy riffs, but it's not really doom heavy anymore. Of course, lots of flute solos. They have guests coming in with violin, so there's a kind of a heavy folk sound to some of their songs. More recent ones also have this late 60s pop type sound mixed in, so they're really evolving their sound with each album. I think their last album was actually recorded in Toronto because of the cost of going overseas. They went to London before, and the cost of going back was just way too high, especially after COVID when they hadn't been able to do anything for a while. So I think they probably wouldn't do well in the States. It's more of a niche type thing. But just saying, like, searching around on the internet for, stuff about Blood Ceremony, it's mostly just live recordings of them from a smartphone that you'll find. I think they have only 2 official videos, too, so far. But
that's great.
Lots of interesting talent there, I think.
Yeah,
I wrote that down.
Check that out.
I'll check that out. I gotta ask Peter. You mentioned a band right out of the gate, and I don't own anything by them, but actually, Rob, our buddy Alex at Beer and Vinyl, brought this to my attention today. Reminded me of the band The Tea Party.
Oh yeah,
my God, I haven't listened to them in forever. I'm going to stream some Tea Party. I forgot all about them.
That's a flashback to the 90s, isn't it?
I know. It's a big nostalgia kick there. I can't wait to listen to them.
Yeah, unfortunately, Jeff Martin, he left the band for a while. He did some solo stuff and some other bands. Then they got back together 2011, I think, released an album. And then there was just this big gap because he was off in Australia releasing solo EPs that he was just selling through his shows only. Wow. And they did 2 EPs digital, and they released them as a CD maybe 2-3 years ago, I think it was. And now I think they're actually coming to Toronto or somewhere in Canada doing a show with some other bands like, what are they called? Headstones and maybe Treble Charger and a few others. There's a show of 5 or 6 bands from the 90s that are going together in Toronto there.
That'll work. You mentioned Danko Jones too. His new one is outstanding. If you're a Danko Jones fan, if you like a song by Danko Jones, you will like everything else because it doesn't change a lot.
Exactly.
So, and the new one is no different, but it's pretty solid. It's Danko Jones, 100% Danko Jones. It's very good. I just bought it last week, and I really, really enjoy it.
I always think of his music as like AC/DC with more exciting drumming and more attitude.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. And he fully admits it. And I saw him live. He goes, if you expect anything different than what we're playing, then you really don't know why you're here, because this is exactly what we are going to do and play. So, yeah. And I'm good with that.
Rob.
All right.
I wonder, do I know this, Rob? Do I know who this is going to be?
It is not going to be who you think it's going to be. Because I talk about who you think it's going to be in every bloody video, and everyone rolls.
Okay.
So I'm not going to talk about Blue Rodeo. But I think everyone should listen to them. Instead,
Agreed.
Instead, I'm going to go with the guy that I think makes the best rock music in Canada, Matt Mays.
That's who I was referring to.
Matt Mays. So
Nice.
Matt is born in Hamilton, Ontario, but raised in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, where he was originally a member of a band called the Guthries and then went out on his own. And he's been making records for better part of 20 years. And he's got about probably 9 albums, I think, now at this point. What does he sound like? I mean, it's Tom Petty, but more rock, I guess is maybe, I think probably a good way to describe it. This album here is called Coyote, and this came out in 2012. So this is 12 years old already, which is shocking. And this won the Juno, again, which is a Canadian Grammy, for Rock Album of the Year. And it's absolutely fantastic. Lots of electric guitar, just a hell of a good musician. Like I said, he's got, I think about 8 or 10 albums, and they're all great, loud, straight ahead rock and roll. And then he has one album that I think is amazing. He did this is called With Love, from Burnside with Love. This is a live show that he did in Quebec, and it's very much MTV Unplugged. Is basically what it's not on MTV, but that's exactly what this was. It was a career-spanning concert that songs from every single album done acoustically with a couple of guest musicians. Like he had a pedal steel player and a fiddle player augment this band, and this is one of the best live recordings I've ever heard. Just incredible, just straight out rock and roll. It's amazing. I've seen him in concert many times. The loudest concert I've ever been to. Even with earplugs, my ears hurt. Like it was, he just blew me away. And his live shows are absolutely incredible. I'd like to make one side note, and I'm going to make a note of this in the description for folks. Matt has a farm in Ancaster, Ontario, where people can come and they do like barn concerts, and you can come and see people play, including himself, play at his barn, which is awesome. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen this year because he just announced that his significant other has been diagnosed with a very aggressive brain tumor, and they've started a GoFundMe to pay for all of the care that she needs. I'm going to leave a link to that GoFundMe in the description if people want to check that out. Matt is one of the hardest working musicians around. I hate to see this happen to anybody, but especially for folks that are self-employed, as they both are, they need all the help they can get. So I'm going to leave a link to that in the description. So,
Awesome.
Good on you, Rob.
Matt Mays.
You know, we got to give a little love to the Canadian ladies, I think, right?
Sure.
Joni Mitchell, Alanis Morissette, Sarah McLachlan, Celine, for what it's worth, right? Big
Feist.
Shania, Sass Jordan. There's a lot of great Canadian females, and there was another one I thought of. It has escaped me now. But Brian, I think you've mentioned there's a young lady that you've mentioned a few times in some of your videos. I think that, I mean, maybe more than one. But is there some new Canadian female? I mean, there's Feist. There's a lot of good Canadian female talent here.
Yeah, I mean, Feist is one that occurs to me, but maybe Emily Haynes and Metric. But that's, again, not that new, but that's something that appeals to me.
I just think we have a pretty good female talent base here in Canada as well.
My favorite, Davnit Doyle, who is a host on CBC Radio, but has been releasing albums for 20 years. This is her album, Liquor Store Flowers, from 2019. Incredible pop rock album. She also fronts another band called The Heartbroken, which... Jason, that was one of the ones I recommended you listen to.
Yeah, that was outstanding.
incredible voice. Yeah. There's tons of Canadian females. I can,
Yeah.
I knew who I was thinking of. Lee Aaron, the metal queen herself.
yes.
Good heavens.
And she is an
Behind me.
outstanding person, too. She is awesome. Yeah.
And she just
Alana-
released a covers album.
Yeah.
Yeah. All her recent stuff is really fantastic. Like, she calls it power rock, and I think that's a good way of putting it. And she's got, and I forgot his name. Sean Kelly as her guitarist in her band. I'd like to put in a word for, you see her here, Shay Amy Dorval. She appeared on Casualties of Cool with Devin Townsend. And she has got this voice that someone described as a voice that can melt the heart of a metalhead with a single note.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Good.
She doesn't sing metal. Her first few albums, it's a singer-songwriter, a woman with a guitar, but she has got this incredible soulful type voice, like this classic soulful type voice to these, slow electric or acoustic guitar singer-songwriter type things. But the latest album that came out, I think it was 2022, it's called The Crown. It looks like they tried to put her more into, I don't want to say pop, but you have a full band, drums, guitar, bass, keyboards, a lot of modern pop effects or sounds, but it's more serious. It has this heavier, not heavy as in heavy guitars, but as in atmosphere. And her voice, she hits super high notes. She sings really low. She's got this she can sing these like deep, breathy type vocals, but also soaring high notes. I really love the sound of her voice. And unfortunately, all her older stuff is only available on download now. This was the only CD I could get a hold of. But actually, even though it's not my usual pick for music, I'm really enjoying the album. It's very well done.
Yes. I'll throw one more incredible female. I think she has the best female voice, I think. Melissa McClellan from the band Whitehorse. She also had a solo career as well. She plays in Sarah McLachlan's band as well. Another fine Canadian female. But Melissa is one half of the duo that is Whitehorse. And they're I'll call them folk rock duo from Toronto, husband and wife. But they change genres every album. They did a folk album and a rock album and a psychedelic album and a country album and a blues album. But her voice is, wow, incredible.
What you want.
Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about the state of new music in Canada? I think of bands like Crownlands. We talk about Rush.
Oh, yeah.
I think Crownlands might have listened to a little bit of Rush when they were younger. I mentioned Glorious Sons. There's a lot of good new Canadian bands that are starting to get a little traction. I think we're in pretty good hands. Those are the couple that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm not sure who you guys. There's also, is it Pup? I think Pup or Gob maybe out of Toronto. Good punk, good stuff. There's some good stuff out there.
There is a band named Gob, yeah?
Sorry, go ahead, Peter.
Sorry. I was going to say, there is a band named Gob that's been around since the 90s that are a pop-punk band.
Yeah.
I think it's Pup that I'm thinking of, though, out of Toronto.
Pup. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Another good new band from your neck of the woods, Joe, is One Bad Son.
It is, and they've got new music coming out.
do.
There's only two of the originals in the band anymore, but they've got a new album out. They just kind of went back out on tour. I think they had some issues for a little bit. They lost some members. One decided he was going to go back to school, and the other, I'm not sure what happened. But I think they've solidified a little bit on the new members of the band. They're writing some new music, and they're getting some things done. Another new artist, actually, female artist, is J.J. Wilde, another opener for the Glorious Sons, and her band kick serious ass. I would highly recommend going to see them. Very energetic, good songs. A little sexual undertones, overtones. I don't think she hides it. I think that's just part of her writing style. But really, really good band live as well. So, and she's got a new EP coming out in the next couple of weeks, I think.
It's funny you should mention J.J. Wilde because she lives where I live.
Yeah.
Which I won't say
hanging
what
out
I won't say what that is. I like to leave that vague. But.
She's been hanging out in Arizona a lot. She wrote that song Arizona, so she went down there, her and her photographer friend, and they have about 1 million pictures of JJ Wild walking around in the desert. So, but good stuff. And like I say, the new EP's coming out. Her, and I don't mean to keep bringing them up, but I really do love the Glorious Sons. Her and Brett from the Glorious Sons do a remake of "Stop Dragging My Heart Around," the Stevie Nicks, Tom Petty song.
Oh, wow.
Nail it. It's really, really good. And I'm hoping it's on the new album when she gets a full album together, because it's, I mean, great song to begin with. Hard to screw it up because it's such a good song, but they do a nice job of it. So
Another band that's making interesting music that is also kind of from Joe's neck of the woods, the first independent band to ever grace the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, the Sheepdogs. They're from Saskatoon, I think, are they not?
yeah, that's right. They are. Yeah. Looks like Jay's got a Sheepdogs album there.
There you go.
yeah.
It's all, look how beat the hell that is.
That's been ridden hard.
I know.
That's been
awful.
partied too.
Oh, my God. That is a fantastic album.
They've got
It's very, I don't know. Is it Black Crows like? For those that don't know who the Sheepdogs are, is that fair
it
statement?
reminds me a lot of Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Yeah, a little bit of that too. Sure, little David Clayton Thomas in
Yeah.
there, but yeah,
I heard their music before I knew anything about the band, and I thought I was listening to a band from the 70s, which
Yeah.
is where I want to.
Okay, that
is where I
sounds
want to
good.
be. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah, like one of the things. Sorry, I was going to say, like,
ahead.
one of the things I sometimes do is just go onto Bandcamp and just do a search for Canadian whatever. And there's actually a lot of Canadian metal bands that have just been out for like with Crownlands. I know they're more progressive, but anyway, just the last 5 or 6 years, there have been so many bands coming out and releasing new material. And one that was talked about on one video I watched is a band called Gateway, who have, I think, 2 full-length albums out so far. And it's that traditional 80s metal, but not over-the-top vocals. Like, you know, a lot of these 80s, retro 80s metal bands, they do like the really high vocals. But these guys are a little bit more got it together. They've got more range. And I think it was Sea of Tranquility. They were talking about just new, this, what do they call it? The new wave of traditional metal. And Gateway was one of the top picks, they said. And they're from out by Vancouver or Victoria, I forget. But I checked them out. They're really good. They're on my hit list. If you like
have to look for that. If you like that kind of stuff.
Yes.
We've got about 12 minutes left, so we'll go around the horn quick. You know, one of the things that Canadian bands have to do by necessity, I think more so than maybe in the States, is they got to play a lot of live shows, and they got to tour a lot because, you know, we don't have near the radio and television that the States does. So there's these bands that are trying to make it here are really, they're on the road all the time. So we've all been to concerts. Who puts on a damn good live show that you've seen that's a Canadian band?
Are we going around the horn?
Sure.
Let's do the horn.
Whoever.
I'm a little out of date because I haven't been to a lot of concerts recently because I struggling with a bit of tinnitus. So I haven't been to a live show in quite a while. In fact, I'm trying to remember the last one I went to. So in terms of Canadian music, like I can't even tell you. God, I can't even remember the last show I went to. Maybe I'll think about it. If we go around, I'll think about it.
Sure.
Everybody with tinnitus, put their hands up.
Yeah, that's right. I feel concerts are going to make it worse, but maybe I'm wrong.
You know what you should do? I've just discovered Loop. They're an earplug, but they make a model that's 4 concerts.
I see
Changed
that
my life.
advertised all the time.
Yeah,
right,
it's
okay.
good.
Changed my life.
They're very good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Recommend as well.
Yeah. Jay, you got anything?
Yeah, for sure. I saw these guys at a wicked little bar in Halifax. Actually, before I went to the venue. Before I went to the venue, we were at a bar in Halifax, and we walked in to have a pre-drink as they were leaving to go to the venue to start the show, and that's the Sam Roberts Band.
Oh, yes.
I don't know why. I remember that Brother Down video got a ton of play on Much Music. very catchy pop rock kind of stuff. I was a big fan. I think I have the first. I don't have the EP. The EP had a lot of the songs like Brother Down and stuff, and this is like the first official debut full length album. We Were Born in a Flame. I don't know where they're at now. I haven't really followed them at all or heard about what he's up to, if anything. But the first 2 or 3 albums I have, and I liked everything they did. You know, to me, it was kind of he kind of filled a void at the time for, you know, I was listening to certain kinds of music and I didn't have any kind of Canadian music aside from the hip and Hayden. And so this was kind of you know, it filled something for me. And I can't say enough about how great of an experience that was live in this small basement venue, the Marquee Club, if anyone knows that in Halifax. It was pretty awesome.
I've seen it.
I'll give you 2 quick because I know we're running out of time.
I got 7 minutes left before my time expires.
Go.
First one's Billy Talent. Never disappointed. Seen him 4 times. They're always a good show. Great vocals, good band, very good. The second one, I will give you your money back if you go to an Alan Doyle concert and you don't enjoy yourself. Exactly. And that's not why I said it. But I saw him in Ottawa last year, and you and I have talked about it. It was such a blast.
Amazing.
Like I also saw Robert Plant. I saw the Foo Fighters. I think I walked away with the best memories from the Alan Doyle show. Good.
I see them every chance I get. My friend is his fiddle player, Kendall Carson.
Yeah.
I go see them every single time they're in town. Love them.
Yeah, exactly.
The man knows how to get 2,000 people moving like I've never seen before. It feels like it's a Newfoundland kitchen party.
100%. Yeah, no, that's exactly what it feels like. And then throw in about 1,000 more people.
Right.
It's good.
Exactly.
It's just good.
Peter, you got any?
Yeah, well, you know, it's been over 20 years since I've been to a concert in Canada. But one of many that always stands out to my memory. Well, no, that's right. I saw Sloan 3 times back in 2005 because my wife really got into them. So we went to some shows. But one concert that always really stands out for me was when I saw Spirit of the West. Which is now going back to about 93, somewhere around then. Similar to this idea of the Newfoundland kitchen party. It was I think it was the Vogue Theatre in Vancouver, which I don't know, is like 500 people. And it was just like 500 people all dancing, and it was just such a party. I think it was also the first concert I went to in that kind of small venue. I was used to the stadium concerts of the 80s. So it was just such a wonderful, fun experience. And I was really into Spirit of the West at the time, too. They're still one of my maybe top 10 Canadian bands. So, yeah, that was an excellent, excellent show to be at.
Fantastic. One of the best folks I've ever seen live, Adam Baldwin, guitar player for Matt Mays. A guy from near Jason's hometown near Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. He is his early stuff. I mean, his hero was Bruce Springsteen, so he sounds like an East Coast Bruce Springsteen. And then his most recent album, which is called Concertos and Serenades, is his attempt to kind of write a Stan Rogers folk record, and it is also incredible. Nice. Does storytelling, I'm going to say it, as good as Gordon Lightfoot does. If you've heard that record, it's phenomenal. But his early stuff is really rock. It's incredible. Quick memory I have of him, I saw him in a 3,000 seat venue opening for another band, and no one was there to see him. No one knew who the hell he was. I did because I was a super fan. He came out, sat on a stool with an acoustic guitar, and by the third song, he had that entire audience eating out of the palm of his hand. It was the most moving concert experience
I got goosebumps, Rob.
It was incredible.
That's awesome. That's good.
So, did you have time to come up with one, Brian? Or are you good?
Well, I could throw out a few names of people I've seen in the past.
Sure.
Which,
Sure.
You know, I and being in Toronto, I was lucky to have seen Blue Rodeo from before they released their record, Cowboy Junkies, many, many times. There must be some more recent than that. I've seen Feist. That was probably the last show I saw that was, you know, a more current one, and that was very good. And I've seen like Bruce Cockburn 10 times, that kind of thing.
Did you ever see Leonard Cohen? Because I know you're such a...
I have seen Leonard Cohen. I didn't see the last tour, but I saw the previous one.
Nice.
And very interesting in concert for sure.
I'm sure. Well, we're approaching the hour mark that I'd kind of set. So Thank you, all of you, for joining me. This was a lot of fun. I'm such a nerd for Canadian music. It was nice to share that with other people who also care about it. So, thanks, guys, for everyone watching. Please give some love to Brian and Embryonic Robot, Jason Arsenault, Racer Joe, and Peter. Music is a Journey. I will leave links to everybody's channels in the description. Please check out their videos, subscribe. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see everyone again.
Yeah, cool. Well,
soon.
thanks, everybody.